What's up, guys? This is Anime Crossover. I'm back with a new episode of What If Naruto was teleported to another world part 24. And if you did enjoy the video, give this video a like. And if you're new to my channel and like my content, subscribe and hit the notification bell for more crossover fictions with a twist. Now let's begin this new video.
Chapter 27. Fury Branch of Law and Order. I've been contemplating whether to publish one lengthy chapter or two shorter ones. I opted on 2 chapters since the tone change seemed so strange that I didn't want to include it in just one. So this one will be primarily for laughs, while the following chapter will build up chapter 29, which I aim to release in line with Fairy Tail's 400th chapter. So I just learned out that Michael Jones from Achievement Hunter would be voicing Sting in the Fairy Tail dub. Worlds collide. So, how do we plan to handle this situation? They were reckless. They caused a panic in Oshibana, nearly destroyed the train station, and destroyed the entire train track. However, they did stop one of the dark guilds we'd had on our wanted list for quite some time, and the only alternative for the destruction they caused would have been to let Eisenwald escape and harm innocent civilians. That is correct. The majority of Eisenwald members were apprehended in that train station because they were bound with steel beams. That seems rather excessive. However, it was extremely useful. However, we have reports that when they arrived in Clover, they had a battle that destroyed a large portion of the surrounding environment and decimated the regular guild masters' meeting hall. According to reports, the battle only destroyed 3/4 of the building. I'm sorry, Yujima-san, but there isn't much of a difference between mostly destroyed and completely destroyed in terms of property damage. Despite our complaints, they did an admirable job retrieving the lullaby flute, Org remarked as he held up a glass container containing the 3-eyed skull flute covered with seals in the center. What matters now is how we choose to approach this matter, he said as he set the container on the table. They need to be punished. We can't punish them for saving people's lives. Well, we can't just let them off the hook. If we do, other guilds may begin to believe that they can commit similar acts of destruction without consequence. Well, then, I have an idea. The other members of the Magic Council all turned over to the blue-haired guy who was reclining in his chair with his feet put up on the table. When he drew their attention, he lowered them and said, "If we can't punish all of them, why don't we make an example of them?" Crawford Seam, chairman of the Magic Council, stood up in his chair and said, "What are you proposing, Seigrain-kun?" Well, a few of the Fairy Tail members involved with the Eisenwald incident are pretty well known. Salamander, Natsu Dragneel, said the young guy with the elaborate tattoo over his eye. The council members sighed. You. The Maker, Mage Grey Fullbuster. You. That new member being acknowledged with the act of breaking down Duke Everlu's mansion. You. The S-Class Mage Titania, Urza Scarlet. You. And the other S-Class Mage, the Hunter, Naruto Uzumaki. You. Of course that troublemaker would be involved in this, Michello spat, recalling the last time the unpleasant blonde youngster appeared in front of them years ago. If you're worried about Fairy Tail portraying themselves as untouchable warriors, it might be time to show how some warriors have to pay the consequences. Dear Mother, I've been a member of Fairy Tail for about a week now. It's a frenzy. Loud. Crazy. Dangerous. But, if I had to confess it, it's been the most fun I've had in a long time. We were involved in a major event with a dark guild named Eisenwald, which was attempting to eliminate all guild leaders. But my crew and I were able to salvage the day without too much difficulty. Not to say there wasn't any issue, but we dealt with it. Natsu and Happy were still as unpleasant and strange as ever, but they showed how capable they could be when the chips were down. We also collaborated with Gray, another Fairy Tail member. He and Natsu don't get along, and he claims he's not nearly as awful as him, but I learned that's not the case. But he's a very kind guy. And quite powerful. He simply has this strange tendency of removing all of his clothing without even realizing it. I also just met one of the guild's most well-known members, Scarlet Urza. I recall reading every story about her. She was one of the country's youngest and strongest wizards, and how she contributed to the struggle against damnation. I was expecting a large muscular woman who was intimidating, but she was really a very attractive lady. There's no denying she's still terrifying. And then there's Naruto. He's a laid-back and nice man. He seemed to be lethargic at first, but after I watched him battle, I realized why he is so renowned. He's quite powerful. And I don't believe he holds back when he fights. But he's really friendly to his buddies and always makes sure they're protected. I simply have to remember not to irritate him. Naruto and Urza are apparently dating. I had no clue prominent individuals like them were dating. I'm curious whether this occurs often in the guild. Anyway, when we returned, we saw that everyone from Eisenwald had been detained. At least, the majority of them. Aragorn, this terrifying man with a scythe, apparently fled before the authorities arrived to capture him. That frightens me since Natsu and Naruto both beat up on the person and he still managed to flee. I sincerely hope we don't run across him again. Anyway, that may seem horrible, but I assure you that I am alright. Don't be concerned about me. And don't tell your father. I adore Lucy. Fairy Tale's busty blonde newcomer reclined back in her chair and extended her arms wide. She tucked them behind her ear and gazed out the window at the lovely blue sky above. Ah, I think today calls for a lazy day, she groaned as the warm rays of the sun washed over her. Tell me about it. This place is pretty damn cozy for a newly purchased apartment, and you said it was also cheap, right? Oh, you could melt into this bed. It's nap time. Lucy hesitated before turning around to see who was speaking in her flat. The maker Mage Gray sat in her cozy recliner, wearing nothing but his boxers and lazing without a care in the world. Naruto and Koyuki were sleeping side by side on her bed, with blissful expressions on their faces. What are you doing, you pervert? Lucy screamed at Gray. Lucy spun around to punch or kick the sleeping blonde, and Gray grasped his nose and whimpered. Whoa. Lucy. Don't encourage violence in front of the child, Naruto said as he covered Koyuki's eyes. Koyuki, look away from the horror. Oni-chan, I'm scared, Koyuki said as he continued his performance. Lucy looked at them, her brow twitching, before turning around and walking up to the desk. Why are you guys in my house? And why are you naked? She asked the intruders. Hey, calm down, all right, Gray replied as he reclined back in his chair. If you must know, I already took my clothes off before we broke into your house. My clothes are somewhere out in the street or something. That doesn't make me feel any better. I came here because we need to have one person looking out for him at all times because he gets in trouble because he's always walking around town naked, Naruto said, raising his hand. Gray said, what? Not always. In all the years I've known you, you've been naked 3/4 of the time. What's up with you? Why are you always naked? Lucy said, shaking her head. Gray was abruptly assailed from all sides. What? I was just raised like that. It became a habit. Who the hell raises a kid to strip off all his clothes? Oh, and you had a perfect childhood. Both blondes shrugged, realizing that everyone's childhoods had various peculiarities that had set in. Well, it's been great having you guys barge in and talk about Gray's stripping, but this still feels strange, so. Lucy pushed open her door and gave it to them, if you'd be so kind as to leave. Gray shook his head at Naruto, saying, I told you she forgot. Naruto shook his head, I thought she was smarter than that. I can't blame her. It was a busy day, and there's no way she could remember what happened before. What? What are you guys talking about? What did I forget? Lucy said between them. Don't you remember what Natsu and Urza agreed to before we all left? Naruto grinned. Huh? Lucy blinked. Battle, said Koyuki as he leapt up on the bed. Fairy Tale members and other Magnolia Town residents gathered on the street in front of the Fairy Tale Guild. The street was alive with talk and animated emotions as people formed a wide circle around the two magicians in the middle of the gathering. Lasana made her way through the throng, holding a water bottle. Here Natsu, keep hydrated, she said as she touched the pink-haired guy on the shoulder. Thanks Lasana. Natsu smiled as he took the bottle. Now it's time to get fired up, he said, wiping his lips and handed it back to her. Now it's time to get fired up. Do you have a battle strategy ready for the fight? Lasana said. Yep. Punch her as hard as I can and take her down. Lasana groaned and scratched the bridge of her nose. No, Natsu. That's not a strategy. It's not. Natsu said, pausing on his feet. No, because that's what you've done every time you've fought Urza. This time, it'll work. I'm stronger than I was before. You said it 3 times already. I almost ran out of gauze and bandages. Natsu sighed and wiped his brow. Okay. What about if I go for her legs or something? Trip her up? He rolled his eyes. Yes. Good thinking. Keep working with your brain and you might come out of this relatively light, said Lasana. Natsu nodded and extended his hand for a high five. The youngest Strauss sibling quickly high-fived him before returning to the throng. The Dragon Slayer inhaled deeply through his nose before slowly spinning around to face his adversary. The stern scarlet-haired knight in armor stood opposite from him. Urza's arms were folded as she awaited the summons to battle her good buddy in a friendly duel. She opened her eyes to see the serious expression on Natsu's face. When their gazes met, the red-haired woman grinned, excited at the prospect of facing the rising Dragon Slayer. Natsu returned her smile with his own huge grin. What the heck is going on? Why are they fighting? Lucy pushed her way through the mob. Gray arrived a few seconds later, followed by Naruto, who was carrying Koyuki. Hey, did we miss anything? They asked themselves. Elfman shook his head, nope. They've just been staring each other down with a manly spirit. Lasana sighed, I can't believe we're actually letting them fight. I can't believe we're not holding this fight in some bomb shelter a mile underground. This is probably going to end with at least half the town destroyed. Macau interrupted. I'm sure they can keep themselves from causing too much trouble, Mira said with a grin. While lowering Koyuki to the ground, Naruto stated, I don't think so. Urza said she was pretty excited about this fight. Oni-chan said she was going to fight Natsu Nichin seriously, said Koyuki. Then get ready for a bloodbath, said Happy as he soared up to their level. But they can't really be fighting each other, right? Lucy said, looking around the room. They're friends, aren't they? They can be friends and still fight. Elfman said emphatically, their manly spirits call out to them to fight. But Urza isn't, Lucy questioned. Gray shook his head, don't. We tried to explain it to him, but nothing pierces that thick skull. But they're two of fairy tale's strongest mages, right? Won't it be dangerous for them to fight like that? Lucy sighed. The members surrounding her all turned to look at her, puzzled. What? She thought as she felt all of their eyes on her. What are you talking about them being the strongest? Well, aren't they supposed to be among the strongest in the guild? Peeved, Gray muttered, as the others chuckled. Well, that's a stupid lie. What blind and dumb idiot fed you that garbage? They received their response when they heard Mira conceal her face and start weeping and sniffling. They all turned around and stared at Gray after seeing the barmaid cry. Oh, Mira, I didn't know it was you. I didn't mean that. I didn't mean a single word, exclaimed the raven-haired guy. Mira wiped her tear. I just thought that if they all worked together, then they would be really strong. Well, they're all pretty tough, Elfman said, shaking his head, but I don't think they deserve the title of strongest. I know I'm pretty strong, Gray said, but I'm sure I've got a long way to go before I reach the strongest. Although I don't think it's a mistake to say Urza is probably the strongest girl in the guild, Levi replied over her shoulder. Lasana nodded, no argument here. What about Mahiro? Mira said, rubbing her eyes. That's a good point, but she's not an S-class. Doesn't mean she can't hit like one. Hey, Naruto, how strong do you think Mahiro is? For a little while, Naruto considered, probably somewhere alongside Gildarts for power. However, I still believe Gildarts is the guild's strongest member. Yeah, but I'd hate to admit it, but Laxus is probably the strongest of the guys still here. What about Mistogen? Says the narrator. Well, we don't even know how strong he is because we've never seen him. Even so, he's an S-class, so he's definitely among the guild's strongest. Aren't you forgetting someone? Cloak? Blonde? Whiskers? Feeling pretty insulted without any mention of who the strongest in the guild is, they said as Naruto frowned and stared back at them. They all exchanged glances before singing, oh yeah, Naruto's pretty good too. Oh, pretty good? Naruto questioned, puzzled, returning his gaze to the Maker Mage. There's an entire town of free space around us, want me to prove you wrong? Lusa's thoughts were racing, I am so confused right now. So, who do you think is going to win? Mira said, turning back to the two mages prepared to battle. Urza. There will be no competition, Urza. Urza always wins. Happy. Lasana admonished as she yanked the blue cat from his floating zone. Show Natsu a little support. He might actually do pretty well. There's no denying Natsu has a manly, unyielding fire in his soul, Elfman added, but Urza's a monster. There's no way around beating a monster. That's not true, Naruto said, shaking his head. Just because you're weaker than them doesn't mean victory is certain for them. Tricks. Skills. Friends. Seeing the arrogance behind their strength. Nothing is certain in a fight. Hey Naruto. Kana shouted above the throng from her improvised bookie booth. How much were you putting on Urza again? 5,000 jewels. Says the narrator. Got it. All of his pals returned his stare with a somber, inquiring expression. Well, I mean, usually you can't predict how a fight will turn out, he shrugged, but Urza's totally gonna win. Tell me, Natsu, what brought on this sudden need for a duel? Urza braced herself for the battle. What do you mean abrupt? Shouted Natsu before pointing at the redhead. I'm doing this because it's been a long time coming. You used to kick my ass for just about everything. Now it's time I get some payback. No holding back. Urza nodded and grinned, very well. Before her basic armor transformed into a red, black, and orange design, the armored woman's torso was covered with light. Her arms and legs were clad in dragon talons like body armor, and she wielded a long crimson sword that touched the stone under her feet. Her red hair was pulled back into twin ponytails, and she wore a pair of wings on her back. Urza clutched the blade and grinned at the pink-haired guy, saying, I won't hold anything back. Natsu smiled and flamed his fists before smashing them together. But the master won't let them fight, right? It'd be too dangerous. Lucy shook her head as she stared between the two wizards. And, as if on cue, the short guild master walked out into the middle of the space and looked between the fighters, saying, Okay, I want a good clean match. If you want to make a move but don't know if it's legal, just go with your gut and hope for the best. And please, for the love of God, don't break too much shit. Everyone around him became quiet as he lifted his hand in the air. A little breeze flowed over them, and the two wizards stiffened their muscles in preparation for their next action. Makarov flung down his hand before leaping out of the path. Natsu sprang to his feet, his fist on fire, and smashed it on Urza's defending sword. He quickly followed with a knee, a punch, then a broad hook kick to her shoulder. Urza, on the other hand, deflected each strike with the blunt of her blade. When Natsu's fist collided with her blade, she utilized the momentum to push him back and strike her sword at him. Natsu, on the other hand, dived under the swipe and whirled on his hands, launching two kicks at her with flames streaming from his legs. Urza hopped over his strike and began controlling his flames so that they ringed her. She raised her blade, and the flames began to whirl around it before she slashed down on him. But Natsu saw her react and used the flames on his feet to drive himself to the side and away from the harm as fire began to spread in all directions. The crowd took a few steps back and gasped in amazement before applauding and shouting at the incredible performance. Natsu sat close to the ground before leaping forward and swiping his whole arm, Fire Dragon's wing attack. Urza leapt away from the flames before twisting on her heel and ready to attack. Natsu stood up and blew out his chest. Hyahhhhh. Fire Dragon's roar. The two fire assaults clashed, sending a wave of dazzling flames in every direction. The flames cooled down after a time, and the two magicians were standing across from one another without a scratch. They dropped themselves into their respective stances and braced themselves for another round before sprinting at each other. Excuse me. Natsu and Urza came to a halt just before making contact, looking towards the place where they heard the new voice cry out to them. A tall frog guy in official attire walked through the gathering, a bag hanging over his shoulder. I am a messenger sent here by the Magic Council, he said. When they learned that the frogman had been brought here by the highest level of magical administration, the people began to murmur and chat among themselves. I'm here today to issue the arrest for property damage and multiple other charges for 1 Urza Scarlet, he said, reaching into his bag and pulling out an envelope. Huh. Urza blinked. What? What do you mean Urza's being arrested? What is it for? I'm sorry, Ms. Scarlet, the frog said as he took a step closer, but I'm going to need you to come with me. Hey. Hold on. Naruto emerged from the throng and stepped defensively in front of Urza. I don't know what's going on, but you can't just take Urza for no reason. You have to at least tell us why. The frog guy remained quiet for a while before tilting his head and asking, "Are you Naruto Uzumaki?" Naruto remained quiet and returned Urza's gaze before lifting an eyebrow in puzzlement. Yeah. Why? You're also under arrest, the council messenger said as he withdrew another packet from his bag and gave it to the blonde. Naruto grabbed the envelope and examined it, saying, "Oh, crap." Naruto sat on a sofa outside the hall's entryway. As a few quiet seconds passed, he glanced down at the shackles that bound his hands and twisted his wrist. He probably didn't need these shackles, and they didn't make much of a difference, but if the council was summoning him for an arrest, he knew better than to protest and resist. At the gates, he and Urza had been separated. They'd probably still have the hearing together since they were accused with the same crime, but they didn't want two powerful S-class magicians in the same room. PSSH. Hey man, do you know how much longer this is gonna take? Why are we just waiting here? Said Naruto to one of the soldiers monitoring over him. We arrived in the middle of another trial that is currently being held. It should be completed any second now, and then we will move on to your hearing, the frogman said professionally. A tremendous kick ripped apart the enormous door, almost breaking it off its hinges. As a tall young guy with long, spiky black hair swaggered out, everyone became quiet. He had studs pierced all over his face and arms and was dressed mostly in black. But it was the guild tattoo of a whirling purple staff on his right shoulder that caught Naruto's attention first. Stupid fucking geezers. Wasting my time every goddamn chance they can. Spat out the guy with the piercings. Any more of this bullshit and I'll bring this whole fucking place down on its foundation. He went away after kicking the door in front of him. The waiting area was deafeningly quiet. I believe it's your turn now. Oh, that's great. Naruto rose from his seat and was led along the familiar corridor towards the court. He used this opportunity to glance around and felt a wave of nostalgia wash over him as he passed by the ancient structure. Not a fan of nostalgia. It's just nostalgia. The surroundings are familiar. A comfortable environment. The same sterile air. Oh, and there were some recognizable faces. A beautiful young girl in a white kimono with long dark purple hair was leaning on one of the pillars just in front of them. She was wearing lipstick and casually fiddling with a turquoise ball in her hands. The frogs instantly recognized her and dropped on their knees, exclaiming, "Ultir-sama. What are you doing here?" "Relax everyone. I'm just here to greet our guest," she said as she lifted herself off the structure and walked up to the slightly taller blonde with a hip sway. "Hello again, Naruto-san," she said as she approached him. He giggled and smiled before turning to face the kneeling people around him. "So, do they just do that whenever they see you or were they trained?" "It's just a bit of common courtesy," Ultir said before throwing her orb into the air and let it to float about her. "They don't want to irritate a member of the Magic Council, or else there might be consequences." Speaking of insane council members, Naruto peered around, anticipating Seagrain's appearance. I didn't think he'd pass up an opportunity to humiliate me while my hands were tied like this. "Unfortunately, Seagrain-sama is unable to come to see you, which is why I'm here in his place," Ultir said. "He had the distinct impression that you wouldn't want to face him after how your last encounter ended." "Okay. He's just as smart as I remember," Naruto said, tilting his head. "I'll be sure to pass along the compliment." "Alright, what's this all about?" murmured Naruto, looking at the aloof beauty. "Why do you think this has to be about something?" Ultir joked. "Because it's always something to do with the council. Everyone is feeling a little anxious about the fact that you were all able to apprehend such a formidable dark guild with very little consequence, and they're worried that you might think you can get away with any crimes of damages because of your actions," Ultir said as she placed a hand on his shoulder and began circling him. "Are you kidding? We never hear the end of them bitching, and of course we know we're not beyond the reach of the Magic Council." Naruto rolled his eyes. "Yes, they still like to show off their power," Ultir said, turning around and looking up at the slightly taller man. "So they're just doing this to assure everyone that they still have control. A quick reading of charges, maybe a speech or two, and you and Titania will be on your way back home for your regularly scheduled bout of heroics." For a few period, Naruto remained quiet before narrowing his eyes and said, "There has to be more to it than that." Why do you think there's something more going on behind the scenes? Ultir said with a knowing grin. Because, well, there usually is. Nothing of the sort, Ultir said as she stood up and began walking away. Just don't cause too much trouble and this should all be over soon. Or do, she said, looking behind him. I've always been more of a fan of trouble and antics. Ultir's thought projection faded away, leaving the passageway silent. You know Ultir-sama personally? The frogmen rose back up and asked the whiskered blonde. Nope, Naruto said, shaking his head, just some girl I fought with a few years ago. Would the defendants kindly take the stand? The doors opened, exposing Urza and Naruto standing patiently as they awaited their admittance. They made their way down the aisle to the vacant stand immediately in front of the Magic Council's seat. Urza's gaze swept over the bench, seeing numerous recognizable faces. She has met many members of the council previously in prior occasions when she had to come to the council headquarters. Ujima was sitting peacefully when he saw the young woman looking across at him, so he smiled and nodded. Seagrain sat on the other side of the bench, slouching back in his chair and presumably simply watching the scene unfolding in front of him. He seemed to be content with himself. She eventually glanced to her side to see Naruto scratching the fuzz around his chin. She smiled quietly so no one would notice. He was attempting to grow a beard to be more gruff like the older guys in their guild, which she thought was charming. When they kissed, it ached, but it was something she could live with. Urza Scarlet. Naruto Uzumaki. Do you know why you stand here today? Crawford said. Urza bowed and said, yes, sir. Naruto groaned, I think we have a pretty good idea. You stand here today for the destruction, vandalism, and damage to numerous government buildings and structures, including the Oshibana train station, the Canyon Railway, the destruction of the Clover Mansion used for regular meetings, and several other damages. Naruto called their attention with his palm. We only actually destroyed half of the mansion. The rest of it fell over on its own, he said matter-of-factly, so shouldn't we only be charged with partial destruction? Several people groaned in response to his query, while Seagrain and Ultir clearly laughed at his assertion. Urza elbowed her partner in the side, causing him to stumble slightly. What? He said, his face flushed. We can't be charged for partial destruction of government property, stupid, she glared at him. But it wasn't entirely our fault. Aside from the lullaby thing, if it fell over after that, it's a problem with how it was built. Blame the carpenter. The Magic Council isn't going to send a complaint and arrest for a carpenter, and they're not going to charge us with partial destruction. Urza sighed and shook her head. Actually, Ujima drew everyone's attention to himself. This has been a topic we've been discussing for a few hours now. Urza glanced up at them, stunned, as Naruto said, haha, I was right. No, you are not right. Michello objected from his vantage point, you are still being charged with that destruction. Oh my gosh, come on. He's right. It's not exactly fair to punish them for something the demon flute did while falling backwards. Why don't we unwrap its bindings and charge it with the damages? Seagrain grinned. Are you insane, you knucklehead? I was joking. I just wanted to see if you still didn't have a sense of humor after all these years, and it turns out I was correct. Why do you, enough? Crawford said emphatically, putting an end to everyone's chit-chat. We are here to hold a trial, he said again, and if all of you are finished bickering, we may proceed. Everyone remained quiet, even Naruto, who straightened back straight and coughed into his palm before remaining silent. Crawford nodded and said, good. Now then. Boom mmmmmmmmmmmmmm. One portion of the wall behind them erupted, destroying the concrete in the door. As a cloud of black smoke began to settle over the enormous chamber, everyone glanced back in amazement. Were they being attacked? Taking this opportunity on the path to attempt to damage the structure? Ha ha ha, and I thought you guys in the Magic Council were pretty competent. But I guess you were wrong. Considering you got the wrong person so easily, said a figure as they made their way through the smoke. Natsu emerged from the dust, clothed in a spare piece of armor he had stolen from a Magnolia shop. He was also dressed in a blue skirt, black boots, and a red wig that he had thrown over his head hastily, with strands of pink hair peeping out. Several frogmen rushed up behind him before yelling, I am the real Erza Scarlet. Fear me. I'm the real culprit. Everyone stared blankly as the pink-haired guy rushed about spitting fire in all directions. Urza was absolutely perplexed by the situation unfolding in front of her, and even Naruto was taken aback by Natsu's dumb move. Until he realized how amusing it was and covered his lips to stop himself from laughing. Urza sent him a frown, but he couldn't stop giggling. "I'm sorry Urza, but I can't PFF'd," he gasped. As Seagrain laughed into his palm and Ultier sought to conceal her chuckles with her sleeve, Naruto held back his laughter. Natsu then showed everyone a rope attached to the back of his skirt and said, "But I'm not alone." When he tugged on the rope, squeaking wheels began to move over the marble floor. Another figure emerged from the smoke, this one nothing like the person they were attempting to copy. 2 barrels were placed on top of each other on top of a moving platform. Happy was standing on top of them, a black blanket wrapped around his torso and flowing down the side. He wore a yellow handkerchief on top of his head and had small eyes. "I am Naruto Uzumaki. Fear my whiskers and tremble at my tallness," he screamed. Naruto's laughter went away abruptly, and he peered at the sight, his eyes hidden under his hair. "How many people do you know with whiskers?" "I am the one and only Naruto," Happy yelled again. "And I'm Erza. Watch me wreck shit and beat the crap out of people." Natsu jumped on the frog guys who were attempting to sneak up on him. He threw one of them away, over his head, towards a gathering of his employees. "Yeah," said Natsu. "Natsu, Urza uses a weapon. Wave something around," Happy said to his closest buddy. "Oh shit, you're right." Natsu searched about for anything to do before ripping off one of Happy's wooden planks and starting breaking chairs with it. The 2 idiots continued to wreak havoc until Natsu pointed to the council and said, "Ha! See, I'd like to see you try to catch the real Urza Scarlet now." Crawford threw the gavel down, saying, "Put them all in jail for the night." "Are you kiddin' me? Let us out damn it," Natsu yelled as the cell door slammed shut. Happy sat in the corner, pouting. "I never thought I'd be watching the rest of my life pass by from the other side of the bars. Natsu, I kinda expected it, but I didn't think it would happen to me. Why do you think I'm going to spend my life in prison? And you too." Natsu gestured to the 2 individuals sitting opposite from him, who bowed their heads and sulked. "Why didn't you 2 say anything? Actually, why the hell did you let them take you away in the first place? You didn't do anything wrong," he exclaimed. Urza pushed her head out of her arms and scowled, "You idiot. Huh. We know we didn't do anything wrong, and the council knows we didn't do anything wrong. They just brought us in to show that they still had sway over what happened in the kingdom, so other guilds wouldn't think they could get away with anything." Happy and Natsu exchanged glances and cocked their heads. "Huh? They would have read the charges, told us to be careful, something like a slap on the wrist, and then we would have been home before the sunset," Urza growled, her eyebrow twitching. Natsu and Happy remained quiet for a time before sweating and saying, "Oh. SC, we didn't know that. And, by the way, what exactly was that?" Urza crawled over and grabbed Natsu's collar before glaring at him. "My name is Urza Scarlet. Watch me smash things and beat the crap out of people. Would you want to explain?" I had to make it convincing," Natsu stammered. I had to make it convincing." "Is that how you see me?" "No, ma'am. I don't understand why you're complaining," they all said, looking across at Naruto's bereaved body, his head concealed in his arms, and he said dejectedly, "Transgender dressing. Storming into a government facility and smashing everything. While you were ranting, I was trying to throw some insults in. It makes no difference. Because you were at least depicted by a human. While I was trapped with a cat." They all stared at Happy, who paused for a while before lifting his paw and said, "I thought I did a good job of playing Naruto." "Why did you bring him?" said Naruto. "I needed someone to act as you," Natsu shrugged, "and I thought Happy was the best choice." "Happy was the best option?" With a vein in his head, Naruto inquired, "Not Elfman? Gray? Loke? Laxus? Mira? What are you doing? Why are you so happy?" For a few period, Natsu and Happy were quiet until the pink-haired guy pointed to the cat's face and said, "He has whiskers." "Whiskers? Is that all it takes to mimic me?" Naruto raged before collapsing against a wall and groaned before shaking his head, "I hate you. Thank you so much." Natsu grimaced as he sat against the wall, gazing around and sighing, "I'm hungry." "We're all hungry, Natsu," Urza said as she reclined back and brushed her hair out of her eyes. "They'll serve us supper in a few hours, so please be patient till then." "But we're hungry now," Happy grumbled, staring up at Natsu. "What are we going to do for the next few hours until we eat?" "Sleep." "It's pretty dark in here," Natsu observed, "but I'm not feeling sleepy." "Me neither." "Oh, okay. I think I've got something to help you guys with that," Naruto said as he stood up and walked over to their side. Naruto grabbed Happy's and Natsu's heads before slamming them together. The Dragon Slayer and Flying Cat moaned in pain before passing out and sleeping on the floor. "Idiots," Naruto grumbled as he sat back against the wall. "I'm sure I could have come up with a better solution to get us out of here. We're trapped here till the morning." "Yeah," Urza said, gazing across at her sleeping pals before smiling and turning to face Naruto. "It might have been idiotic, but it's the thought that counts." "The notion of a moron." Naruto grinned and glanced at her. "Hell, I'm an idiot, and even I thought this plan was foolish." When he saw Urza's beaming expression, he couldn't help but chuckle while scratching his head. "Okay, it was fairly nice that they came to help us. I simply wish they hadn't replaced me with a cat." "You should have seen the look on your face." "What about my face?" "You should have seen my expression. You just crashed when Natsu came running in with a skirt and wig." Naruto groaned and glanced up at the ceiling. "What are we supposed to do until the morning?" The two lovers chuckled as they sat in the prison cell. "I don't know about you, but I think they had the right idea," Urza said, adjusting her seat so she was leaning on Naruto and resting her head on his shoulder. "I'm going to take a little nap." Naruto narrowed his eyes at the female laying on him like a pillow and said, "What about me? What am I going to do while you're sleeping?" "Try sleeping. If we only shut our eyes, it will all be over sooner." Naruto groaned as he felt Urza gently relax into his arm, looking down to find her with her eyes closed and calmly breathing while nuzzling into his side, then looking up to see Happy and Natsu sleeping loudly together. He groaned and decided to follow in their footsteps, sitting back a bit, leaning his head back and a little on Urza's, and closing his eyes for a little sleep. A person stood along the path, calmly peering at the prison cell full of sleeping fairies, smirking before strolling away and returning into his room. Seagrain stepped into his room and saw Ultir leisurely sitting across the seat of his chair, her legs dangling off the side as she spun her orb in hand before seeing the blue-haired guy return. She stopped spinning her orb and said, "So, what were they all doing?" "I'm sleeping, if you can believe it. It's actually quite enviable how they can relax so easily." Seagrain sat in the chair opposite her and glanced back down at the chess game that was already in progress, leaning forward in a thinking stance. "It's actually quite enviable how they can relax so easily." "Well, I'm delighted you seem to be envious of the fairies. But if I'm forced to work, you're forced to work as well." Ultir sat up and stood up from his chair, handing him a file on the table and saying, "Here. Everything you wanted to know about the Galuna Island situation." Seagrain took the file and began flipping through it, looking at the pictures of various men and women dressed up in strange garments, but the most important image was one of a massive demon, mouth open as if roaring in agony and completely encased by ice. "A couple of days. At most, a week. With just a little more moon drip, the shell should begin to melt away." Ultir perched on the armrest and peered over his shoulder. "Once they release the demon and kill themselves fighting it, I'll use the spell you gave me to take control of it." "What will you do with it once you have control?" "Perhaps I'll keep it around as extra muscle until the tower is finished. It couldn't hurt to have a trace of Zeref's magic to use when we're resurrecting him." Seagrain leaned back in his chair and set the file down before returning his attention to the chess game. "I actually feel quite cruel in forcing you to take on this task. There is no tougher chore than forcing a youngster to delete their own parent's existence." "I'm grateful for your sympathy, but it's wasted on that woman," Ultir sneered. "I've already told you that she was a failure as a mother and a failure as a human. In my opinion, you merely invited me to go on a task that needs me to melt ice." "My, you're quite warped in your way, aren't you?" Seagrain said to his colleague, somewhat amused. "Like you're the kind to speak." "This is how I survived," Ultir said as she rose up and went over to the window, where she sat on the ledge, holding her orb in her palm. "We're almost there. Zeref's resurrection, and with it, a fresh new world, is just around the corner. The field has been set, and the players are taking their places. Seagrain said as he reset the chessboard and clasped his hands together in meditation. Now all that remains is to play the game. Goodness, Seagrain-sama. Where might I be on that board? Queen? Knight? Or just a little pawn you'll toss aside when the time comes? Your position on this board is entirely up to you, Ultir. Whether you want to be a piece that sets everything up to happen or a pillar that changes this very world is something you can choose for yourself. He reached over and gently tapped his opponent's black pieces. The resistance has already started forming their ranks. The legal guilds. The Rune Knights. The Magic Council. No doubt that fairy tale will become a problem while we're trying to apprehend. Yet they're still just pieces in the puzzle, all planned and calculated. Seagrain remained motionless for a minute before shaking his head and said, "No, not all of them are just pieces." "Oh?" Ultir said as she stopped spinning her orb and looked across at the blue-haired wizard saint. "The only other person I could consider as a player in the broad spectrum of how this all plays out would have to be Naruto." Ultir was taken aback by his response before becoming intrigued by his choice of adversary. "Really?" she said, tilting her head. "He doesn't exactly strike me as someone who would match you in an intellectual bout. He isn't. He can't plan for errors or fail-safes. He can't guide people or use them to his advantage. He doesn't even realize he's a part of this game. But everywhere he goes, it's as if he throws a wrench into the system. He plays every move with his life on the line and somehow comes out to tell the tale. When it comes to the endgame and the last moves." Seagrain raised his gaze to the seat across from him, where a superimposed picture of Naruto sat. "He'll be the last obstacle to overcome before the new world can come to fruition," he said as he dropped his hands. "The hero's pain and work will finally come to light. The savior will bring an end to this world and usher in a new paradise. And all of this will be complete." He leaned over and took the king piece across from him before running his fingertips over it. In his palm, he crushed the black piece until it was nothing but dust. "When I bring an end to the villain and his false world. Omake. Mira-sensei, teach us Hello, everyone," said the lovely white-haired lady, who wore a lab coat and a pair of glasses on the bridge of her nose. "Are you all ready for another lesson?" She smirked at the camera. Someone played stock sounds of a cheering audience. "Today, our experimenter is none other than Naruto Uzumaki." A light shone down from above, revealing the whiskered blonde sitting alone on a chair. "Why am I here?" he wondered. "And my assistant for this experiment, Lucy Heartfilia." Another light shone down, revealing Lucy seated immediately near Naruto. "Why am I here?" she wondered as she gazed about. Mira grinned and said, "Let's all give a big hand to our friends who are helping us today with our experiment." "Mira, what's going on? You just told me to take a seat and do whatever you say," Naruto said. "Me too," Lucy said as she gazed up at the model, Mira-san. "Why did you tell me to be the control in this experiment?" Mira disregarded them and returned her attention to the camera, saying, "Now everyone, don't try this at home. What we're going to do today is dangerous and may cause injury if you don't have the right preparation." "Say what? Can I please not do whatever this is? Fortunately for us, we have people here today to make sure things don't get too crazy. Let's all give a big hand to our volunteers," Mira said as she rose back up. Mira waved to the side, revealing Natsu, Gray, Urza, Elfman, and Hapley in black suits and sunglasses. They were frozen in place, ready for anything. "Eagle 2. This is Eagle 1. Everything is clear on my side. How's yours look? Over." Natsu tapped his ear. Gray, standing next to him, stroked his ear and said, "Eagle 1, all clear on my end, over." "What are you idiots doing?" twitched Naruto's eye. "Mira told us what she was planning to do, so we prepared ourselves for what might happen, over," Urza said, touching her ear. "I may have failed the first time I tried it, but as a man, I won't screw up this time, over," Elfman said, touching his ear. "Aye sir, over," Happy said as he tapped his ear. I'm so frightened right now," Lucy said, her eyes as big as plates. "Today's experiment is..." Mira flung her hands in the air. The lights came on, revealing a table in front of the two blondes. It was encased in a plethora of alcoholic beverages and liquor. How do different alcohols affect a certain blonde male fairy of ours? Naruto and Lucy locked their gaze on the table. They then exchanged glances and blinked before returning their attention to the table. Naruto shrugged and went for a bottle, saying, "I'm just drinking. Is that it? I take back everything I said about this silly game." Lucy observed Naruto open a bottle and pour it into a cup for him to sip. "Mira-san, am I supposed to be drinking too or?" she asked the scientist in charge of the experiment. As you can see, the subject is blissfully unaware of his condition while intoxicated, so we will observe how his behavior affects our non-intoxicated subject, our control, while he consumes the alcohol. Lucy blinked. "Wait. What? Beer?" Naruto swayed in his seat, a silly grin on his face, and odd hiccups every few seconds. After around 20 minutes of drinking, Lucy glanced at the now drunk blonde. "Is he gonna be okay?" She leaned back in her seat, looking at the camera. "Please do not talk directly into the camera." Lucy. Naruto placed an arm over the girl's shoulder and caused her to scream before he brought his drink out. "Want a quick swig? I bet you'll like it." Lucy shook her head and said, "No thanks." "Nonsense." Naruto forced the bottle into Lucy's lips, and her eyes became plate white as she waved her arms in protest. When he took the bottle back, she coughed and fell out of her chair, and he chuckled, "Atta girl." Lucy coughed up some beer with a tear in her eye before looking up at the others and exclaiming, "Why are we doing this?" "Don't worry, Lucy. We're ready to flee this place at any time for safety." All of her suit-clad companions were kneeling and ready to rush at any minute, encircling Mira on all sides. "Whiskey." Naruto wiped his nose before wailing, "And then, after a whole day at work, I came to the guild. I asked for a bowl of ramen. And there wasn't any left. I couldn't blame Mira because she's so nice and she works so hard, but still, I was so sad." Lucy was taken aback by his demeanor shift from humorous and joyful to sad and melancholy. There, it's okay," she caressed his back. Naruto was about to take another sip from his bottle when it slid out of his grasp and rolled on the floor. He said as he sank back in his chair and began to slide out of it. "Is this normal?" Lucy asked all of them. Urza nodded. "Something about whiskey just makes him sad. Keep an open ear and he should be fine." Mira scribbled on her clipboard, "Buy. Surplus. Of. Ramen. Tequila." "What in the hell are you looking at?" Lucy shrank back, saying, "Nothing." "I know you're lying because you're staring at me," Naruto snarled. "Why, you told me to." Naruto sprang out of his seat and yelled at her, "Who the hell do you think you are?" I'm Lucy." "Liar. I know Lucy. She's a nice girl with blonde hair and keys. Do you think you could be Lucy?" I told you I'm Lucy. Who the hell is Lucy?" "Hey. Who the hell are you guys? Let me go." Sunuva, Gray and Natsu stepped in from the sides and retrained his arms as he began jerking about. "Hey. Who the hell are you guys? Let me go." Sunuva. Elfman flew in and smashed into Naruto's form, pinning them all to the ground. Lucy shook her seat and straightened her hair. "I'm starting to really regret this decision." Scotch. Naruto sipped his drink and leaned back in his chair. He glanced up to find Lucy, Mira, and everyone else looking at him with anticipation. He lifted an eyebrow and said, uninterestedly, "What? You feeling okay?" "Yeah. Why? You seem sober. How is that possible? You drank like a bar." "Maybe I just came full circle." Naruto shrugged, swirling his drink in his fingers. "I don't feel any different." Everyone blinked in astonishment and exchanged glances. "Well, that's unexpected," Lucy said, running her hand through her hair. "Yeah. Almost as unexpected as you saying you were thinking of taking that Candygram job where you go to someone's house and kiss them on the cheek to make rent this week." What?" flushed Lucy. "Do you remember what you told me when we met in the middle of the street?" I told you to keep that a secret. Why are you saying it now?" Naruto shook his head and continued to sip. It appears that when he drinks scotch, he loses his ability to contain secrets, so Mira hummed and glanced at her clipboard. "Once upon a time, Elfman got a job where he went to a little girl's birthday party dressed up as a fairy princess. They all stared at the biggest guy in the room, whose mouth was absolutely slack. They all laughed quietly to themselves. Well, Elfman, I had no idea you were into that kind of stuff. Maybe." Gray calmed himself. Gray was mistaken for a male stripper while walking in front of a ladies' dance club half naked. They grabbed him, forced him on stage, and he said it was one of the best paying jobs he ever got. He still occasionally returns for an easy buck under the name Icy Dazzletish. Gray became pale as everyone discovered his darkest secret. It's all right, man. People do a lot for their jobs. Urza told me she was doing something that required her to wear a suit today, so she asked to borrow a pair of my boxers to get into the mindset. Mira gazed across at Urza, surprised that the lovely redhead averted her sight. I was intrigued by the concept, so I swapped underwear with her, and I'm currently wearing a black thong. Okay. That's enough for today. I hope you all had a fun time with us today, and I hope you all learned that. Mira jumped in front of the camera. Myra's only doing this because she feels insecure after Jenny Relight told her she's all boobs and no brain. Turn the camera off. Turn off the camera. Turn off. Story. Can you guess who it was? Kitsune Dragon. That's correct. The author of the most badass anti-hero Naruto I've seen on this website made a portrait of my Naruto and posted it on his DeviantArt page. If you haven't already seen it, you can find it on my profile page. Freedom. It smells so sweet. Natsu yelled at the top of his lungs before downing an entire cup of liquor. He tossed the cup across the corridor, which beamed someone in the face, yet he still screamed, "Hooray for fresh air." Cheers. The guild was apparently celebrating the release of 4 of its members after just one night in a cell. Some fairy members were seated at a table, and Lucy was watching the ecstatic dragon slayer leap for pleasure at the end of his confinement. Why is he acting like he just got out of a life sentence? He was only in there for a night, Lucy said to Lasana, who sat next to her. Lasana shrugged as Natsu chuckled on top of a table. Well, Natsu's always been happy about the little things. He's, you know. An idiot. Gray said as he grabbed his cup. Lasana gave the maker Mage a slight glance before nodding. If he was a real man, he wouldn't have gotten himself caught for no reason. Yeah, well. Lucy turned ahead, dryly staring at the blue cat sleeping on top of the table. It looks like he isn't the only one playing out his jail time. I'm serious, guys. I don't know if I can live on the outside anymore. I spent too much time behind bars. I'm institutionalized now, Happy remarked, looking up at the ceiling, wondering whether he could ever adapt to life outside of jail again. You were only there for one night, and you claim to have slept through the majority of it. Yeah, but I could have been there for a lot longer. Happy sat up and counted on his paw. I'd have to start shanking people. Smuggling in supplies for favors. Sell Natsu for some cigarettes. I don't smoke, but I still would have done it. I don't think I can ever go back to the way I was. Lasana slid a platter of fish over to his side. Fish, he said, picking one up and chewing on it with a dreamy look. Chank Mu, Lanama. The other guests at the table stared in awe at the youngest Strauss sister before Lucy exclaimed, "You are amazing. You need to teach me how you do that. Man, we might actually start listening to those old guys if they threatened us with jail every time we screwed up." Natsu continued to giggle. Shut up. As Naruto's boots bit into Natsu's face, he was blasted with a soaring dropkick. As Naruto landed and yelled angrily at his companion, "We wouldn't have had to spend a night in jail if you and Happy didn't interrupt the trial like idiots." Hey, we were doing it to help you guys. Natsu rose out from the ruins of a shattered table. We didn't ask for your assistance. We could have finished in an hour and gone home if you hadn't decided that was the best time to come barging in dressed in drag. I did it because those jerks interrupted my fight with Urza. Natsu blinked. Oh, speaking of which. Urza, our fight isn't over yet. Are you serious? A vein nearly burst. Mira pouted from behind the bar, while Makarov slept out on the wadden top. Natsu, don't start fights just when you get back. She cupped her palms across her lips. But I've been waiting for this fight. No more interruptions. Urza and Koyuki were sitting at a table a few meters apart. Senju, the tiny brown-haired girl, yawned and looked up at the elder lady. Please Natsu, not now. Urza stroked her temples. We didn't sleep very well yesterday, and I think I have a headache. You can't keep putting this off forever. Your time is coming. Koyuki had a silly pout on her face as she gazed across at Natsu. Natsu Nichan, you're being mean. Stop being mean to Oni-chan. The tiny girl rose up on the bench and began reprimanding the elder guy. No way, Koyuki, I know a headache isn't enough to stop a monster woman like her. Natsu shook his head. Oni-chan isn't feeling well because you snored all night. It's your fault, so stop. No way. It wasn't. Yes, it was. Aha. Everyone turned to see the mighty dragon slayer quarrel with the enthusiastic 5-year-old, and was in some ways losing. Okay, if you really want to continue Natsu, I won't argue, Koyuki said as Urza rose up from her seat. Yeah. Natsu leapt down from the table and dashed towards Urza, determined to fight for as long as it took. He drew his fist back. He was quickly vanquished, however, as Urza leapt up and kicked him in the face before following through and slamming his skull into the floor. Everyone stood still as Urza backed away from Natsu's face, revealing the dragon slayer with a boot mark across his nose. His leg trembled slightly, but he did not get up or move. Yay. Oni-chan wins, said Koyuki. The guild just began laughing at Natsu's failure and cheering Urza's victory. Mira was clapping her hands as well before Makarov jerked awake. Master, is something the matter? She inquired of her short master. Nothing's wrong. The wrinkled old guy scratched his brow before looking ahead with a solemn expression, but he's finally back. Who's? Mira said, tilting her head. She slumped almost instantly behind the bar. Several heads turned as they discovered the brave barmaid had passed out behind the counter. Mira? Koyuki's eyelids flickered for a split second before she collapsed on her buttocks and sprawled over the table. Then Happy's eyes closed and he tumbled forward with them. Lucy came next. Then there's Levi. Then there's Kana. Elfman, too. Naruto felt a rush of lethargy and tiredness sweep over him, and he almost staggered back, clutching his head, saying, crap. Not again. Nobody could keep their eyes open for very long before falling asleep and falling out of their chairs. Even Gray and Urza couldn't resist the strong want to sleep and fell asleep. The whole guild hall was filled with snoring and sleeping mages. A shadow began to form across the room, and a guy entered through the big entryway. A guy in a dark blue cloak with bandages covering his limbs began wandering across the sea of sleeping magicians. A green belt draped over his chest held many exquisite staffs attached to his back. But it was hard to see his features since he was wearing a bandana over his head and a scarf over his face. He moved forward a few steps till he stood in front of the short wizard saint. The guy said quietly, I'm back. Makarov gazed up at the S-class mage who usually put everyone to sleep when he arrived into the guild. Mistogen, why must you always put us to sleep when you come here? He muttered. It saves me trouble, he said, walking up to the job board and pulling a piece of paper off for a position. I'll take this one. Mistogen. The guy with the staff turned around to find Naruto, his fellow S-class mage, with bags under his eyes and fighting to hold himself up with a table. Why the hell do you have to do this every time? It's a pain in the ass for everyone when we're in the middle of something and you come pull this shit, snarled Naruto at the weird guy. It's good to see you too, Naruto. I always find your conversations to be so riveting, Mistogen said before beginning to go towards the exit. Naruto wrinkled his brow and scowled slightly. He hadn't figured out who this person was or what he wanted after 2 years. He only returned to the guild for another task maybe once in a blue moon. Mistogen exited the guild, and his body vanished like an illusion. Everyone in the guild awakened in amazement before rising to their feet. What happened? Lucy yawned, rubbing her eyes. Did we all pass out? Did Mistogen come by again? Lasana massaged her chin. Yeah, Naruto said, forcing himself back to his feet and massaging his stomach with a pain. He came in and picked up a request flyer before just leaving, just like every other time. Well, that guy is a textbook example of an introvert. Who's Mistogen? Lucy said, scratching her head and looking around her table. He's a guild member, but we don't really know anything about him, Lasana said to the blonde girl. Every time he comes here, he casts some kind of sleeping magic over the guild and knocks everyone out. When we come back, we're all on the floor, and there's a job missing from the request board. Gray stretched out. He puts everyone in the guild to sleep. How is that possible? Lucy wondered. He's powerful, Elfman replied. We've never seen him before, but he's one of our S-class mages, and only a few people have ever seen him. Wow, really? Yeah. G-san sees him all the time, and Naruto figured out a trick to keep himself awake when Mistogen uses his magic to put us to sleep. Lucy stared in surprise before gazing over to the whiskered blonde as he approached Urza to check on her. How does he do it? Lucy said, returning her gaze to Gray. Whenever he notices everyone falling asleep, he just slaps himself or jabs himself in the stomach, and the pain keeps him awake long enough for Naruto to figure out why Mistogen keeps putting us to sleep. Lucy was taken aback by his manner of keeping awake, saying, "Geez, how'd he figure out how to do that? One time he was eating a steak when Mistogen came through, so he fell asleep on a fork and woke up screaming," Lasana said uneasily. Lucy grimaced. Urza brushed her skirt off and peered over to see Koyuki yawn and open her eyes. Did he have anything to say? She asked Naruto after he opted to ignore the agony in his stomach. Nope. It's still just an in-and-out deal, Naruto muttered, scratching his head. He said about 10 words to me before leaving this time, though. Urza murmured, that's an improvement from last time. Naruto groaned as he remembered the few times Mistogen passed by the guild and he attempted to start up a conversation with the outcast. The whiskered mage didn't know why, but he thought that if he could speak to the aloof mage, they might become friends. Have you tried confronting him yet? Of course I have. I cut him off before he walked out of the guild, but he just fades away like a mirage. I even tried to steal his mask, but he jumped away before I could. Naruto grasped his head and muttered, 2 years and I still don't know what that bastard looks like. I do. Naruto's eyes widened as he glanced up at the sound of the confident voice. Everyone else glanced up to see a person hanging over the second floor rails, a smoking cigar in his lips. When he saw everyone's attention was focused on him, the spiky blonde guy with the lightning bolt scar chuckled. When Naruto's least favorite guild member reared his arrogant presence into the discussion, he narrowed his eyes in anger. I saw him with his mask off once when he didn't think anyone else was looking. The elder guy chuckled, and I bet you'd love to know what he looks like, right? Wanna beg and see if I'm feeling generous? Naruto growled, in your dreams, asshole. Lucy glanced up at the guy peering down at them and felt a strong presence emanating from him. Who is that? She exclaimed, feeling overwhelmed. That's Luxus. Don't even bother trying to talk to him. He doesn't give anybody else the time of day because he's an S-class, Gray spat out. Lucy blinked before returning her gaze to the guy as he tapped the ash off his cigar. This person, like Urza, Naruto, and Mistogen, was an S-class mage. But for some reason, this man felt quite different from the rest. Even though they were powerful, they still interacted with others and loved their time with their pals. But this man. Just by being there, she could tell he was menacing and terrifying. Laxus, we still have a deal to settle. Meet me outside and we can finish our fight. Natsu eventually came out of the dirt with the same enthusiasm he had before. Urza smacked him across the face and said, pace yourself, idiot. She's right, Natsu. I don't feel like wasting my time going outside to lay your ass across the street. Laxus smoked his cigar on the railing before mocking the pink-haired guy. Why don't you come up here and try? All right. Fine. Natsu marched up the stairs to confront the pompous lightning mage. I'll be up there, he leapt over the counter. As Natsu leapt into the air, a large palm crashed into him and blasted him back through several sets of tables until he collided with the rear wall. Makarov returned his hand to normal size before resuming his grip on his wooden staff, saying, when you earn the status to go up there. Ha ha ha. And I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon, Natsu. Laxus chastised, hitting the banister and chuckling at Natsu's pitiful performance. And I bet you'll have an even harder time making it when I become the next guild master. He massaged his eyes. Everyone felt a mixture of disgust and nausea at his arrogance, as if becoming their future guild head was predetermined. Laxus, don't just assume it's your position so easily. There are a lot of candidates who show promise and merit for leading this guild, Makarov said to the guy looming above them. Oh right, my mistake. I forgot we have such a diverse and grand assemblage to choose from for the next master, Laxus said with a sweep of his palm before beginning to count off from his fingers. Let's see, we have an old man who has been missing for years and is already buried in an unmarked grave. A reluctant mute who can't look anyone in the eye and shits himself at the thought of talking to someone. A weak little girl who can't get over the fact that she failed the expectations she set for herself and everyone else. Mira winced dramatically, gazing down at the ground in humiliation and firmly clutching a washcloth in her hand. Some woman who tries every day to appear intimidating and assertive, when in reality she's just a pathetic little girl hiding behind some armor. Urza clenched her teeth and stared at the mighty mage. And, of course, there's the crippled freak. Naruto wrinkled his brow as he grasped his fist, the metal of his prosthesis creaking. That was not the case. A clever joke. Laxus. Makarov said calmly, that's enough. Make no mistake, I will be the next guild master, and I will be the one to make this guild truly great. Whether any of you are still here when that happens is entirely up to you, Laxus said, standing up straight and staring down at everyone. He stepped away from the railing, and there was a flash of light followed by a rumbling of thunder before he vanished from the scene. The remainder of the guild was left in quiet, staring up towards the second floor. That prick always knows how to make me mad, Naruto snarled, glaring down. Urza and Koyuki were clothed in their pajamas, sitting atop Urza's bed in Fairy Hills as the sun set. After they had both come out of the showers, Urza was lovingly combing Koyuki's dark hair as Senju played with a cat toy. They sat peacefully in the room, enjoying their brief time together. Oni-chan? Said Koyuki, looking up at Urza. Yes? Why did Laxus Nichan say such hurtful things to everyone? They all seemed sad and hurt when he was speaking. Urza continued to comb her hair, recalling Laxus's arrogant display of ambition to conquer the guild. It was the same thing he'd been saying for years, and he always meant it. That's just the kind of person he is, Urza sighed. He finds some kind of reassurance in knowing that people remember how strong he is. But he said all those mean things to you and Oni-chan, right? Urza finished brushing the smaller girl's hair before turning to the redhead. That isn't what family does, right? Actually, Koyuki, that's just what family does sometimes. We yell at each other. We insult each other. We argue with each other. Sometimes we make each other so blindingly angry we can't even stand it. But that doesn't change the fact that they're still with us through thick and thin. Urza gave a small smile. He might be a total jerk, but I'm sure we can still count on Laxu. Before the smaller girl grinned and clutched Urza's chest, Urza smiled and smoothed Koyuki's mop of hair. Tap asterisk tap. They both turned to check out the window when they heard tapping on the glass. When they looked around, they spotted Naruto standing outside the window, waving to them. He didn't appear to bother at all that they were on the second level. Urza lifted Koyuki from her lap and went up to the window, opening it for him to pass through. He entered her room and took a step inside, glancing across to where she had knocked down the walls of two adjacent rooms to completely contain all she possessed. He laughed. I forget how big this place is sometimes. Oni-chan, did you come for a sleepover? Said Koyuki. You know guys can't spend the night here in the dorm, Koyuki, it's against the rules, Naruto said, shaking his head. Even though Urza adored him and he did sneak into her room for visits, she nonetheless enforced the dorm regulations as any good den mother would. Urza saw he was fully clothed and carrying a load of provisions over his shoulder. You're going off on a job? This late? She said. Yeah, Naruto said, looking off to the side. Something about hearing Laxus talk just makes me want to punch something. I just took a quick mission from the lower request board. Something about stopping bandits or marauders outside of a town called Datura, so it won't take too long. I'll be gone about a day or two, Urza said as he kneeled down next to Koyuki. You gonna be safe? Koyuki asked her older brother. Of course I am, he said as he held the young girl back. I'm always safe, so don't worry, okay? Okay. Naruto drew back and smoothed her hair as she chuckled before standing back up and looking at Urza's grin. He shrugged and said, I promise I'll be careful. I know you'll be careful, but I'm more concerned about how much trouble you'll cause. Urza took a step closer and put her arms around his neck. Come back soon, okay? Yes, ma'am. They exchanged glances before Naruto said, Koyuki, turn around. This is the gross part. Ew. Koyuki said before turning around and covering her eyes to avoid seeing the show between the lovers. Naruto threw his arm around Urza's hip and they kissed. They kissed for a long minute, savoring each other's feelings and warmth. They eventually came to a halt, smiling and saying, I love you. I love you, too. Naruto stepped up to the ledge before saluting and leaping over the side. Koyuki dashed up to the window just in time to see Naruto strolling back towards town. Oni-chan, he's gonna be okay, right? She said as she sat back down and got on the bed, staring up at Urza as she watched her boyfriend depart. Urza returned her grin and nodded, yeah, he'll be fine. There isn't much he can't handle. Naruto could probably deduce from the request form that the persons he was meant to stop were some crooks who came rushing in and extorted the town, threatening them with violence in exchange for money and stealing goods. He just assumed that some individuals were terrified and sought for a means to prevent them from proceeding. This was not what he had expected. The village was desolate, and some of its structures had been demolished. Shops were smashed into, and goods were strewn on the concrete roadway. People were fleeing through the streets in a panic, most of them attempting to help the wounded and battered, while others were unable to deal with their losses and were just wailing in sorrow. Naruto strolled through the street, seeing toddlers with bleeding bandages covering portions of their bodies and adults hobbling with crutches under their arms. He remained mute as he glanced about in terror at everything. Don't be stupid, brat. You'll get yourself killed. I can do it. I'm strong enough, damn it. You'd be going off to die if you tried to face those monsters. Naruto turned around to see a youngster, possibly little older than 11, arguing with a bunch of young and older males. He had spiky blonde hair, but Naruto couldn't see his face since he was shouting. Get out of my way. I can do something about this. We ain't gonna let some kid kill himself trying to be a hero. One guy grabbed the youngster off guard and threw his arms around him before yanking him away, saying, "It's for your own good. Let me go. Let me go. Let me go. Let him go. He's strong enough to do anything." Shut up. You'd just get killed with him if you left. Someone screamed at Naruto, "Hey!" as they carried the youngster away. When the blonde guy looked back, he saw numerous men staring at him with apprehensive eyes. "What do you think you're doing here?" one of them said as he approached. Naruto blinked and remembered he had arrived on a task. I'm from Fairy Tail. Got your request. Show us. Show us some proof. Naruto realized that they were forming a mob, with terrified ladies and men staring at him as if they were about to leap at any moment. He cautiously grabbed the end of his right sleeve before pushing it up to reveal his black tattoo. Some folks exhaled a sigh of relief, while others remained apprehensive of this newcomer. Let him get through. They all turned to watch a middle-aged guy with a scraggly beard make his way through the throng. "Are you really the mage who took on this job?" he said, looking Naruto in the eyes. "Yeah. Is this really just marauders?" Naruto nodded. After a little time of silence, the guy beckoned for the mage to follow him. Naruto hesitated for a split second before following the guy through the wrecked village until they arrived at a tiny tent. "I'm the mayor of this town. I'm the one who made the request you accepted, and to be honest, I lied to you," the older guy said as he perched on a stool and coughed. Naruto had previously determined this. "What's going on here?" he said, crossing his arms. The guy ran his palm over his face before pausing and shook his head. "They robbed us. Stole from us. Beat us. And when there were those few fools who tried to stand up to them, they decimated them without a second thought. We tried to get help and send word, but they threatened us. They told us if we said anything or made contact with other people then they would spread a wave of death over this town and let the streets run red with the blood of the children." Naruto watched the guy sink into sorrow before narrowing his eyes and asking, "What's going on here?" "I lied because I knew if we sent word of who was really here, they'd send an army of rune knights, that before they got here, they'd slaughter all of my people." The mayor shook his head. "So I had to find some way to get the message out. Against these people." "Who's here?" Naruto inquired once again. "What exactly is going on?" "It's called the Dark Guild. One of the worst," said the guy, shaking his head. Grimoire heart. And then everything else in the world became quiet. He couldn't hear the rustle of the wind or the wailing of those outside. He didn't realize he was sitting in a tent with a guy who was expressing his dread via his words. As Naruto's eyes gradually widened, everything around him vanished into blackness. They had arrived. He was present. Somewhere nearby. "I'm not asking you to fight the guild alone." The mayor dropped his head in shame. "I'm not even requesting that you fight. Please, please, please spread the message before it's too late. Warn the rune knights to be cautious when they come here. Inform guilds to conceal before assaulting. We have the funds to compensate you. If you give us some time, we'll obtain the remainder of our remaining monies and much more. I can't bear burying any more of our dead, he scratched his eyes. As the mayor gazed up at Naruto, he was quiet for a minute. I'm afraid I can't do that. Any large attack force would be recognized immediately, and they won't hesitate to kill you if they think you had anything to do with it, the mayor said as Naruto rose up and went to the exit. They'd probably simply murder you all to tie up loose ends. I won't take this job, Naruto said as he unzipped the tent flap. The mayor sat there in shock as Naruto walked away without saying anything more. You're killing us, said the mayor, falling to his knees. Now go away. You're killing us. While the mayor's shout rang through the air, Naruto strolled along the street. But he was completely oblivious to what was being said. Something else was occupying his thoughts. 100 or so mages camped in a clearing in the forest began loading their food and equipment aboard a tiny airship parked only a few dozen feet away. They were reloading their spacecraft since they were about to leave to rejoin the main airship at any minute. Hey, come help me with this, said one guy as he approached a big tent that had been folded up to relocate. Another guy ran up and grabbed the other half, hefting it up and putting it in. When they were done, they began to ask each other, why did we come all the way out here for? Hades-sama summoned us all here while he conducted business with another guild. He speculated that this may have been one of the locations where a key was released. But it wasn't the case. There was no key here, or somewhere nearby. We don't question his decisions. When people attempt to dispute with Hades-sama or the Seven Kin, they don't last long. Yeah, whatever. Now that we've taken everything from that town, what are we going to do with it? They wondered. I'm not sure. Probably burn it. The same as we always do. That makes sense. However, not all of the Seven Kin are present at this time. Do you believe they'll be able to completely demolish the remainder of town by ***************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************** That wasn't me. Oh, then, who was it? They turned around when they heard a whistle and saw a blond guy with mismatched brown and blue eyes staring at them. He grinned and cracked his knuckles. The talks with Tartarus have concluded. We haven't reached a deal yet, but after we've released Zareth, I'm sure they'll change their minds. Is there any reason we couldn't join you and the others? Bringing more of you would have merely confused things and made it more difficult to converse. I'm sure there are a few of you on both sides that are excited to see who is the strongest. Particularly you. I guess you're correct. When are you going to arrive? Within an hour. Just keep still, and we'll locate you. Where is Ultir in all of this? Ultir is engaged with another task I assigned her. She won't be reporting in for a while, so don't expect to hear from her soon. Understood. The communication lacrima shut off, leaving the 4 individuals in the dark. You ha 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 ha. Ultir-san is certain to receive the most enjoyable job. You're bound to have a good time if you get a job from Master Hades. This isn't something she's doing for fun. She's doing it for a living. It would be prudent not to mix the two. Perhaps for you. I don't believe there's any use in working so hard if you're not going to enjoy it. Merity, how about you? Do you think we should go out and have some fun? I'm worried about Ul. I don't see why you should. Ultir-san is capable of handling herself. You should simply unwind. Follow Kane's lead. Om nom 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 nom. See? Why don't you sample some ice cream as well? I'm sure you'll feel better. Not at all hungry. Peeved, dress yourself. How much longer are we supposed to wait here? 1 hour. The ship will arrive and get us in. Then let's find something to do to kill time. After all this time, a large portion of that community is still standing. Why don't we go murder the most people first? That seems unnecessary. So? We'll have to do it anyway, right? Let's turn it into a game. No, thank you. I don't want to waste my energy killing people who can't even fight back. Om nom 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 nom. All well, anything. More for me, please. If you need me, I'll be in the village. Boom asterisk. When the explosion reached their ears, the chamber within the miniature airship trembled. When they turned towards the exit, they heard their subordinates shouting and fighting. Looks like you might actually find something interesting to do after all, Zancro. Naruto clenched his teeth and grabbed a guy by the collar before hurling him into a gathering of magicians like a rocket. With a thunderous shout, the whiskered mage drew his black sword and rushed through the mob, obliterating their weapons and blasting men away with his tremendous might. Dozens of magicians began to gather their power and launched wave after wave of strikes at the whiskered blonde. He collected chakra in his palm and fired a wind wave to deflect the strikes before dashing through the smoke cloud and evading the remainder. He twirled through the torrent of lethal attacks before slamming his fist into the face of one guy and sending him flying. Naruto began pounding down mage after mage, driven by instinct and rage to beat these guys down and destroy all they had. He slashed through the supplies. He sabotaged hardware. As he prepared for the approaching conflict, he cast grimoire heart members to the side. While Naruto was not encircled, he flung his head back and roared, "Hades, come out here now. You decrepit old fucker. I know you're still alive. Come out here and help us finish this. Hades." Before cowering and stumbling back in fright, the grimoire heart members all gazed at Naruto and prepared to assault him again. Naruto couldn't figure out why they were fleeing until he felt a large wave of heavy and dark magical force push down on him. It wasn't the underworld. He had memorized that man's magical signature after almost being slain as a youngster. Nonetheless, this power was enormous. "He isn't now present. But would you want us to give him a message for you after the funeral?" Naruto cautiously turned around and faced the individuals who were attempting to suffocate him with their combined magical strength. The first was a tall, muscular guy with tan skin and a beard. He had a tattoo of a line running down his left eye and hair that sprouted out in all directions. He was dressed in a tribal attire and had his arms crossed, studying the blonde guy over with a calculated glare. A much shorter, younger female stood behind him, barely reaching his waist. She was a small girl who wore a bizarre winged headgear over her pink hair and a purple leotard with a cape and displayed no outward expression. A young guy with long, bushy blonde hair stood next to her. He was dressed in yellow and blue and had a guild tattoo on his right chest. The most unsettling aspect of this guy was his eyes, which gazed over you like a slab of flesh, and his insane smile, which appeared like a serial murderer poised to cut out his next victim. Finally, there came the tallest and broadest member of the group of four. His complexion was chalky white, like snow, and he had shaggy black hair on his big head. He wore simply tights and a double-strapped design over his chest to keep his cape in place. And he was finishing his ice cream before stuffing the remains of the waffle cone into his mouth. Their magic was odd, unsettling, and terrifyingly potent. "Lanky stick," Naruto said, pointing from left to right. "Brat, the stoic. Face of psycho rape. And a walking pudding tub. Okay." Naruto slung his kokiri over his shoulder before raising his right fist. "Who wants to have the first go?" To be continued.
That's it for this podcast and for listening to this video. I hope you did enjoy the story, and if you did, like, share, and subscribe for more. And thank you all for happy support, and have a great day.